The dog heard the warning tone and froze. The metal floor beneath him was about to hurt. Across the box, there was a way out. Not a locked door. Not a chain. Not a wall too high to climb. Just a low partition a healthy dog could clear in a second. Other dogs had already learned it. Tone, jump, pain stops. But this dog did not jump. He lowered himself onto the floor. The shock came. He whimpered. Still, he stayed there. The researchers watching might have expected panic, scrambling, some wild attempt to get away, anything. But the strange thing was not that the dog was afraid. Fear made sense. The strange thing was that the dog had already decided escape was no longer worth trying. There was a way out. His body could take it, his eyes could see it. But somewhere inside the animal a lesson had already settled in. Nothing I do can change what happens next. This was not the beginning of the experiment. By the time the dog reached that box, he had already been taught something. Not taught with a word, not taught with a command, taught by experience. In the 1960s, Martin Seligman and Stephen Meyer were studying how animals respond when bad things happen and they have no control over them. It is an old experiment, and by today's standards, it is uncomfortable to hear about. It involved dogs and electric shocks, and it raises ethical questions that deserve to be taken seriously. But what it revealed has stayed with psychology for decades, because it describes something painfully human. The setup was simple. Some dogs were placed in a harness and exposed to shocks they could stop. They had a response available to them. If they acted, the discomfort ended. Slowly, they learned the connection between their behavior and the result. Another group received the same shocks, for the same amount of time, but nothing they did made any difference. Their movement did not stop it. Their effort did not stop it. Their distress did not stop it. The shock ended only when another dog, somewhere else, performed the correct action. From the outside, the two dogs experienced something similar. From the inside, the lessons were completely different. One dog learned, when something bad happens, I can act. The other dog learned, when something bad happens, I can only endure. That difference mattered. Later, the dogs were moved into a different box. This time, escape was possible for all of them. There was a low barrier in the middle. A dog only had to jump across it to get away from the shock. The dogs who had previously had control learned quickly. They heard the tone, felt the threat, and worked out the new rule: jump over the barrier, get to safety. But many of the dogs who had previously had no control did something that unsettled the researchers. They did not try. They did not investigate the barrier. They did not keep testing the space. They did not seem to behave like animals trapped in a new problem. They behaved like animals who had brought an old answer into a new situation. I can't stop this. So they lay down. That is the part that stays with you. Not because the dog was trapped. He wasn't. Not because escape was impossible. It wasn't. But because past experience had traveled with him. The old lesson walked into the new box first. You might recognize this feeling, even if your life looks nothing like a laboratory. Think about a child who asks for help again and again, but every request is ignored, mocked, or turned into trouble. Eventually, the child may stop asking. Adults might call them quiet, mature, independent, but sometimes silence is not maturity. Sometimes silence is a record of all the time speaking did not work. Think about an employee who joins a company full of ideas. In the first meeting, she suggests a better way to do the project. Her manager dismisses her. In the second meeting, she tries again. Someone senior takes the idea and presents it later as if it were his. In the third meeting, she raises a concern and gets labeled negative. By the fourth meeting, she says nothing. Not because she has no ideas, because her brain has started doing maths. Speaking equals risk. Silence equals safety. From the outside, people might call her disengaged. They might say she is not leadership material. They might wonder why she never contributes. But the question is not only, why did she stop speaking? The better question is, what did the environment teach her would happen when she tried? It happens at home too, in quieter ways. A woman asks her husband to help with cooking, cleaning, laundry, school runs, bedtime, or the invisible little jobs that keep a household breathing. The first time, he says he will do it later. The second time, he does it badly and waits to be rescued. The third time, he turns the request into an argument about her tone. The fourth time, he acts wounded, as if being asked to participate in his own home is a personal attack. Eventually, she stops asking. She cooks. She cleans. She plans. She remembers birthdays. She buys the school shoes. She knows where the passports are. She can tell you which child has PE on Wednesday and which bill comes out on Friday. People call her capable. She is capable, but sometimes capability is what resignation looks like when it has learned to be efficient. It happens in friendship groups, too. There is always one person who becomes the designated driver, the one who books the restaurant, the one who reads the cancellation policy, the one who checks everyone's dietary requirements, the one who takes the trip out of the group chat, who turns jokes and voice notes into an actual plan. At first, she asks for help. Can someone else call the hotel? Can someone collect the money? Can someone please decide between these 3 dates before the prices go up? Silence. Then one person replies with a laughing emoji. Someone else says, "I'm easy, you choose." Another person disappears for 3 days and comes back with, "Sorry, just seeing this." After a while, the organizer stops asking. She either does everything herself or lets the trip die in the group chat, where many trips go to be with the Lord. If stories like this are the kind of thing you want more of, subscribing takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps. Now back to the dog, because the dog is where the uncomfortable part becomes clear. The uncomfortable part is not simply that we give up when things are hard. Most people do not give up after one hard thing. They give up when effort and outcome keep getting divorced. You try to explain yourself, but the person is committed to misunderstanding you. You try to improve at work, but the goalposts keep moving. You try to budget, but every month a new emergency eats the progress. You try to set boundaries, but the family member punishes you with guilt, drama, or silence. You try to ask for support, but somehow you end up supporting the person you asked. At some point, the brain starts protecting you from the pain of repeated disappointment. It whispers, "Don't bother." And the dangerous thing is that this whisper can sound like wisdom. It can sound like being realistic. It can sound like maturity. It can sound like, "I know how this ends." But sometimes, what we call realism is an old wound trying to predict the future. That is what makes the dog in the box so haunting. The shock was real, the fear was real, the earlier powerlessness was real, but the new opportunity was real too. The problem was that the animal could no longer tell the difference. What was happening in that box became known as learned helplessness. Psychologists use the phrase to describe what can happen when a person or animal is repeatedly exposed to situations where their actions seem to have no effect. Later, even when control becomes possible, they may fail to use it because the nervous system has learned a painful expectation. My actions do not matter here. That sentence is the center of it. Not "I am lazy," not "I don't care," not "I enjoy being stuck." My actions do not matter here. Seligman and Meyer's early work was linked to depression because it suggested a brutal little mechanism. If a person experiences enough uncontrollable failure, rejection, punishment, or disappointment, they may stop believing effort can change anything. Later, researchers added more texture. People do not all respond the same way. Some forms of helplessness stay tied to one situation. You may feel powerful at work, but powerless with family. You may be confident with money, but helpless in relationships. You may speak up easily with friends, but freeze in front of a certain manager. Other times, the lesson spreads. One bad workplace becomes, "No workplace is safe." One failed relationship becomes, "People always leave." One unanswered job application becomes, "There is no point applying." One family pattern becomes, "This is just how life is." That is when the explanation becomes dangerous. Because a single event becomes permanent. A specific problem becomes personal. One area of life becomes everything. This is why learned helplessness is so easy to misread. From the outside, it can look like passivity. From the inside, it often feels like prediction. The employee is not thinking, I want to ruin my career. She is thinking, every time I speak here, I pay for it. The wife is not thinking, I love doing everything alone. She is thinking, every request becomes more work than the task itself. The friend who stops organizing is not thinking, I hate everyone. She is thinking, nobody moves unless I carry the whole thing. And sometimes the person who appears helpless is not the only one who has learned something. The husband who never cooks may have learned that if he performs confusion for long enough, someone else will take over. The colleague who never volunteers may have learned that reliable people will be punished with more responsibility. The friend who never makes plans may have learned that the group will still include them, even if they contribute nothing but vibes and one late LOL. Human systems teach everyone. They teach the overfunctioner to carry. They teach the underfunctioner to wait. They teach the silent person to stay silent. They teach the loud person that volume works. So when we talk about learned helplessness, we are not only talking about the person who stopped trying, we are also talking about the environment that trained them to stop. That does not mean people are doomed. The most important part of the story is that helplessness was learned, and learned things can be challenged. Not always quickly, not with one motivational quote, not by shouting, just try harder, at someone who has spent years being punished for trying. The way back usually begins smaller than that. One safe action, one piece of evidence, one moment where effort and outcome meet again. For the dogs in the experiment, the researchers had to physically guide some of them over the barrier more than once before they began escaping on their own. That detail matters. Sometimes the body needs evidence before the mind can believe. So where does this actually show up in your life? It shows up when you have stopped applying for better jobs because silence from recruiters has started to feel like a verdict on your whole future. It shows up when you sit in meetings with good ideas in your throat because the last workplace taught you that speaking honestly only creates enemies. It shows up when you stop asking your partner to cook, clean, or share the mental load because every request turns into an argument, an excuse, a sulk, or a performance of helplessness so dramatic it deserves its own interval. It shows up when you are always the friend who drives, books, pays first, chases everyone, and turns chaos into a plan. Then one day you realize you are tired not because you hate planning, but because nobody else has been required to grow the muscle. It shows up when you stop setting boundaries with family, because every boundary becomes a court case, complete with witnesses, history, tears, and someone saying, after all I have done for you. It shows up when you keep saying, that's just how they are, when what you really mean is, I have stopped believing they will respond differently. And it shows up in the other direction too. Ask yourself, where have you learned that someone else will always jump the barrier for you? And where have you become comfortable letting the responsible person carry the invisible work? Where do you call something not my strength because conveniently someone else always makes it their burden? The mirror here is not only about where you feel trapped, it is also about where you benefit from someone else being trapped. So the question is this: where in your life have you mistaken an old lesson for a locked door? Thank you for watching. I would genuinely love to know your answer to that question in the comments, because this is one of those topics where people recognize themselves in very different places. If this story made you think, like the video. If you want more human stories that reveal the psychology underneath everyday life, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.